Hey guys, welcome to episode 9 of Maniacs season 2. And as you can see, I am not interviewing anyone for this episode, and a little bit of a crazy week, but I did have an interview scheduled, and unfortunately it got canceled at the last minute. And then I rescheduled another interview, and that also got canceled. So I was in a bit of a quandary, but wanted to make sure that I did put out an episode this week. And I actually think that this was kind of a blessing in disguise, because there is a letter that I received from someone that I've been speaking with, and she told me a very heartbreaking experience. And she reached out to me actually after the interview that I had with Carol, and was reluctant, but also she has gone through a healing process and wanted to share her experience as well. And this episode is going to be about that, about her experience, the letter that she wrote to Rod Parsley, and the response that she received back from that. And then we're just going to go into some Ohio labor laws, and you'll see kind of how that fits into all of this, and also the laws in Ohio for clergy as mandated reporters. So when this person, and obviously she has not agreed to come on camera yet for several reasons, but I told her that I would, keep things as anonymous as possible, as I usually do with the guests that are reluctant to be on camera or their information shared. So she explained to me that she started going to the World Harvest Church that was on Wright Road, which I think at that point was called Word of Life. And she started going there as an infant. So she really did grow up in World Harvest Church, and essentially her entire life, as well as, Carol had as well. And she, World Harvest was her life. Her parents were very dedicated there. And then she, went to the academy there, which was World Harvest Christian Academy, which is now Harvest Preparatory School. And at one point in the mid-90s, we're not going to give the exact dates, because that could potentially give away who she is. But in the mid-90s, this is when World Harvest was in their heyday. And during the summers, they, as in World Harvest Church, would allow the young youth to take on jobs within the ministry. And there were no work permits, which we'll discuss that as well. But in Ohio, you have to be at least 14 years old to get a work permit. And I can tell you that this person was not that age. And there were several other young people that were working at the church in different departments that were also not of age to receive a work permit. So she was asked, and she said, yeah, I'll work, because, she was, sorry, there's a fly in here, and I'm not going to edit all of that out. So let me get back to this. But if you see me doing this, that's because there's a fly in my house. So she was always at the church anyways. And so the church was, asking the youth if they would like to work in different departments for minimum wage. They had more than enough work, and of course it was cheap labor, and World Harvest loves cheap labor, and they obviously use and abuse not only the Valor students and anyone else that is willing to work for very meager wages, but at this point they were also doing this to the youth. Now, I can't tell you exactly how they were able to pass this off, considering if they were paying them correctly, then they would have to go into some system. But you also have to remember this was in the 90s, so everything wasn't as, digital and electronic as they are today. And so that may have been one of the reasons that this kind of got glossed over, and no one really paid attention to the fact that there were several underage kids that weren't even old enough to get work permits working at the ministry, and again being paid minimum wage. So I will get into the letter that she wrote several years after leaving the church, but before that, she was placed in a department within the ministry, and in this department they were processing prayer calls, going through some mail, things of that nature. And shortly after her being in that department, maybe a week or two, someone from another department who was the head of that department and also an elder within the organization came and grabbed her from that department and said, "You're going to come and work with me now." Now, I can tell you from my time there that the ministry seemed to be more concerned about what things look like, and nothing, like there wouldn't be, you wouldn't want to give any indication of even a sense of impropriety. So even me, as the human resources director, if I needed to meet with a male, whether it was a staff member or an interview or anything like that in my office, I could not close the door all the way. Now, there was a window, but you couldn't necessarily see all the way around to my desk. And so I would have to either put a door jamb or something in there so that the door would not close all the way. This young girl was working in this department with this much older male, and there were people in other departments kind of surrounding it, but she was really in there with him alone. And unfortunately, there was a very short time of a grooming period, and then sexual abuse and molestation started happening. She was almost on a daily basis abused, and she would also be taken off of the property without anyone knowing. He was hiding her and, was threatening her to not tell her parents, not tell anyone else. She would have to cover up bruises that she got from beatings if she was not behaving correctly. And again, this went on for several years. And she did end up leaving. And a couple of years after her leaving, she did end up telling her parents about what had happened to her as a young girl. And she went through a healing process, a healing journey, and she ended up in January of 2005 writing a letter and sending it to Rod Parsley. And we're going to show the letter. Now, you'll see that there are some things blacked out. There are some things that have been eliminated completely. And the reason for that is the paragraph that is eliminated completely is a detailed account of the abuse and molestation from this elder. And but the copy that was received by Rod and his staff members, they were able to see this. Even I have not seen this. Now, she did give me a pretty detailed account, but I believe that there was probably more in this letter than even she wanted me to see. And so she did make the decision to take that out before she sent it to me. So I'm going to read this, and as I'm reading it, we're going to show a copy of it, and then we're going to discuss then in further detail of what the response was back to her, and then go into, of course, some scriptures about the duties of not only all of us, but especially of clergy and pastors and preachers, of protecting the vulnerable and protecting their flock. What the state of Ohio says about the responsibility of clergy, and then also labor laws, just because I'm still perplexed as to why so many young people were being hired in these parts of the ministry, and essentially they weren't going through the proper channels of having these young people employed. So on January 6, 2005, the letter was addressed directly to Pastor Rod Parsley. And as you know, I don't call him that, but I will say that just for the fact that that's how she worded the letter. So this says, "Dear Pastor Parsley, it is after much prayer and consideration that I have decided to write you this letter. First and foremost, I want you to know from my heart that I have no ulterior motives in writing you other than to inform you of a situation that occurred while I worked in the blank department of World Harvest Church. No one blank knew until recently. Thanks to God for his healing power, I have been freed from the pain and shame of my past, and now I hope that my coming forward will prevent another child from being a victim of molestation. The molestation went on for the duration of my employment at the church. It only stopped because I resigned my position to pursue my studies, and an injury made the job extremely difficult. I did not make the situation known to anyone at the time because I was afraid blank and did not think anyone would believe me. In my mind, he was a respected elder of the church and I was just a kid. I only told about the molestation when the effects began to take its toll on my emotional and physical health. I then sought the help of a psychologist, and with their assistance have been able to come to grips with the reality of what was done to me. It was only at that time that I was told blank, blank, blank. I know the integrity of the ministry. I know you would have never allowed nor condoned such behavior from any of your employees, church members, and especially not your elders. A year ago, I couldn't have said this, but I am willing to face blank if you need me to, Pastor, as long as someone can be with me. I just don't want this to happen again to someone else because in fear and shame, I kept quiet. Again, Pastor, please know I am not seeking, maybe I should make this bigger so I can read it. I am not seeking anything from you or the church. I just felt the responsibility to make you aware. I would hate for reproach to be brought on the ministry who employs such a person unknowingly. This was a very difficult letter to write, but it was the final step in going on with my life. I stated above I had kept this information private except for blank and blank. I am asking that you use the same discretion with this information, sharing it only with those who need to know in order to remedy what needs to be repaired. If you would like to contact me, blank, and then everything else is blanked out, as you can see. So this young child, okay, let's just say that. Let's say this young child was put in this position because she wanted to make a little extra cash during the summer, and she was already at the church. And unfortunately, the church allowed that to even happen in the first place. But then she starts to experience this abuse and is in fear and can tell no one. And then several years later, she gets the courage to come forward. And I now want to read you the response that she received from the ministry. So we're also going to show this, and this is what the response says. The person that's responding says, let's say again how good it was to see you and your mother a few weeks ago. Please be sure to tell your dad I was sorry I didn't get to see him as well. I'm sending the following message to you on behalf of Pastor Parsley. And it says, I have copied Miss Carter on this email so that you may contact her by email or you may contact her by phone to arrange for a meeting. She has indicated she can be very flexible as to the time or location of the meeting. If you have further questions, please advise. I look forward to hearing back from you. And Miss Carter was the attorney for the ministry. And so instead of meeting with this now woman that was being abused as a child, and seems to be very well known by the ministry, because this person is saying, you know, it was great to see you and your mother, and I'm sorry I didn't get to see your father as well. And instead of having a meeting with her and discussing this, they simply pass her on to an attorney. And, you know, that is, to me, not only disgusting, but deplorable, that instead of having the decency to hear out someone that was a long patron of your ministry, and their family was as well, that you would pass them off to an attorney rather than have any inclination to sit down and have a meeting with this young lady at the time to find out more about her experience and why she was reaching out to inform the ministry of what was going on. So she was very, you know, not only discouraged, but, you know, just kind of disgusted that being a member for that long, that they would not even have the decency to sit down and meet with her. And come to find out that not only did they not take her letter seriously whatsoever, but that at least two more young girls, and we're going to say young girls because they're both underage as well, were hired to work in that department with said child molester. And we don't know at this point whether they were also molested, but I think that you can assume probably with almost 100% knowledge that unfortunately it probably was happening with these at least two other girls. And so we have not only now this person that came forward and said that this was happening to her, and not only did it happen, but several years later she did inform the ministry, and nothing was done except for them telling her to contact their attorney. The elder had not been terminated. He had not lost his position. He had not been sent to therapy or counseling. He had not been arrested. He was still working at the ministry and still working with young people after they were made very much aware that this person was a child predator. And you not only have that situation, but you have the situation that we discussed with Carol. Carol was 17, she was groomed and preyed upon by a 25-year-old. She was then in a meeting with her, the gentleman that was preying on her with Rod, with some elders within the church, and nothing was done in that situation either, nor did they have the decency to inform Carol's mother, to make sure that there was someone in the room to give her support and to give her some compassion and some love that she had gone through this experience. And all they're worried about is protecting themselves and their ministry. They're not worried about protecting their children. They're not worried about protecting their young people. They're not worried about protecting their flock that has been charged to them. They are worried about their money, their reputation, and that it all be swept under the rug. And this is just another example of that. And again, when I first started this podcast, it was to show and uncover the fact that the ministry is very toxic and it's abusive, and they are, conning and swindling very good-hearted and good-intentioned people out of all of their money. But now, after I found out more and more, and I'm sure there's more to be found out, that there are young people, children, that have been abused at this ministry, at the hands of this ministry, and they've been made aware, and instead of dealing with it, they cover it up, they protect the predator, and the victims are just left to flounder out in the wind, and no care is being given to them whatsoever. And so now the mission is that we expose this, and that we make sure that there is some accountability and some justice for these children that are being abused, for goodness sakes. So I then want to talk about clergy and pastors. And so this is specifically for the state of Ohio. In Ohio, clergy are considered mandated reporters and are required to report any suspected child abuse to authorities. A mandated reporter must report if they suspect or know that a child under 18 or a person under 21 with a developmental disability or physical impairment has suffered or faces a threat of suffering physical or mental wound, injury, or disability. And, this isn't just a civic duty of a pastor or an elder, but I believe that there are biblical principles that even support this as well. And so we look at Matthew 25:40, and it talks about it doesn't say this, but regardless of what a state law requires, that there is a biblical mandate to protect those without power and a voice. And that's Matthew 25:40. We must speak up for the vulnerable and the oppressed, including the unhoused, widows, single mothers, orphans, and innocent children. Time and again in the scriptures, God calls his people to be compassionate and to care for the least of these in society. But Jesus further demonstrates how precious children are to the community of faith when he talks in Matthew 19:14. Let the children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. He also warns that it would be better for a person to drown in the sea with a great millstone around his or her neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. And that's Matthew 18:6. And that is, a scripture that I have used before, especially when we're talking about protecting children. And the the unfortunate thing here is not only do we have multiple situations where child abuse was happening at World Harvest Church, and the leadership was made aware of it, and no one did anything, no one investigated it, no one looked into it further. They just swept it under the rug, they covered it up, and again, these young people are now left to just fend for themselves and figure it out, which seems to be very much par for the course at World Harvest Church, because they do not care about your heart. They do not care about your mental state, your spiritual well-being. They don't care where you are and meeting you where you are and ensuring that you are getting spiritually fed. They do not care about your soul. They care about swindling you, getting your money, getting your children in their school, getting your young adults in their college, and then they, again, are used, abused, and discarded like trash, just like I've been saying throughout these episodes. And it is so unfortunate that we are in this situation that we have been discussing, and now we're back to speaking of it yet again with this another new young person at the time coming forward and talking about the abuse that she faced at the hands of this ministry. And then because they did not do anything when she told them, they did not heed any of the information that she was giving to them, that I can say with almost 100% certainty that there were more young people that were abused and molested at the hands of this elder. And we do know of at least one other person because Pastor Dan discussed it when we interviewed him. And so we know there was at least one more person that was abused by this person. And I can tell you that they were most certainly aware, if not only by this person that has decided to come forward now. I don't know if anyone else told them about any abuse or children being hurt, but at least in this situation it was. And we know of another elder, unfortunately, that was abusing young girls at Harvest Prep, and nothing was done about that either. It was just covered it up. So when is enough enough? When do people stand up and say, this has got to be looked into, this has got to be investigated, we have to protect, regardless of anything else, we have to protect these children. We have to make sure that parents are aware of what they are getting themselves and their kids into. And I can tell you, had I known, I'm disgusted that I worked for a place like this, that I have found out the things that I have found out. I am disgusted that I allowed my kids to go there. And let's just also mention from Carol's interview that Ashton was at middle, in her mid-20s to late 20s, was engaging in a sexual relationship with a boy at Harvest Prep, that Child Protective Services were informed, investigated it, and the Parsleys did something to make sure that Ashton was not charged with anything, because the family of that boy was having dinner with them at the Parsleys' house. And again, Child Protective Services did not impose any charges, as far as I'm aware, that would indicate that Ashton was found out for having this inappropriate relationship with someone at Harvest Prep. So now let's go into the fact that in Ohio, and I looked up, this is exactly what I typed in. Ohio labor laws for minors in 1995. Again, this happened in the 90s, but I chose 95 because it's kind of right there in the middle. It says, the Ohio minor labor law considers any person under the age of 18 who has not graduated from high school to be a minor. Employers must display a list of each minor employee and must ensure that any minor employee over the age of 14 has obtained a work permit from the Ohio Board of Education. And I will go on further to say that you have to be at least 14 to be issued a work permit. And I can tell you that based on the age of the person that gave me this letter, and based on the age of several other people that were working at the ministry during this time in the summertime, they were not 14 years old. They were younger than that. They were working full-time hours as cheap labor for the ministry, and some of these young people were being abused and molested at the hands of these leaders, these elders, and then the head leadership was made aware of it and nothing was done. So I am imploring anyone and everyone, reach out, send me your messages, reach out to the Attorney General, reach out to Columbus Police Department, because again, this is not just something that can be swept under the rug, regardless of how long ago it was. Because if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, then it probably is a duck. And if this was happening then, what's to say that it's not happening now? What's to say that these things are not being swept under the rug, and that children are continuing to be abused at Harvest Prep, at World Harvest Church? And we already know that there are several issues that have happened at Valor. Now, the kids at Valor are college age or older, and so they are technically adults. But that doesn't mean that they cannot be groomed and abused also. And I don't know if you saw my interview with Everett with Ohio for Freedom, but that there is laws protecting people when they are engaging or are in a church setting, that people in these positions, pastors that are in these positions, that end up having sexual encounters with anyone else, regardless of if they're an adult, that they are in a privileged position. And so it's not always, it's not looked at as being consensual, because it is considered sexual abuse by a clergy member, because they are using their power and authority to gain control, to make you believe that God is telling them something that you probably know is wrong, and then they engage in the behavior anyways. And so again, I am imploring you to not only speak out and share your story, but also reach out to the authorities, regardless of how long ago that it was, because this cannot continue to go on, and we cannot continue to allow an organization that is pretending to be a church, and they are, under this guise of loving God and loving people, which I can tell you the leadership does not, if you haven't figured that out already. But we cannot continue to allow them to not have any accountability and for there not to be justice for these children at the very least. There's a lot more people that have been hurt by this place and abused by this place and taken advantage by this place and just, again, left to hang out to dry, basically. But we have to take a stand, especially for these kids, to say, no more. We are going to be silent no more. We are not going to continue to protect these people and these names and the organization, corporation as a whole, when they are forsaking the flock, they are abusing the flock, and they are not protecting anyone but themselves and their wallets. So at this point, I will end this episode. Again, I wish we would have had a guest this week, but I believe that the Lord had different plans and that He wanted this to be shared, and that we must continue to shine a light on these things. Even though they are ugly, they are disgusting, but it is reality, and it's a reality for a lot more people than you think. And these people need our prayers. I need your prayers, and you can't imagine how heavy the burden is to continue to hear these things over and over again. And to see these people not only not take responsibility or even apologize, repent, anything, but instead they mock, they get up on this platform and pretend like they're the victim and that all of these other people are, me being, the enemy number one, that I'm demon possessed, that I am just a gossiper, and that I'm just trying to get some notoriety for my podcast. I assure you, I not doing that for any of those reasons, and I certainly did not start for those reasons either. And not that I need to say that, I think most people already know. But at the end of the day, like I said, we need to have some accountability and some justice for these young people. So please continue to subscribe, like, share these episodes, and please continue to reach out. I know many of you have, but continue to reach out to the authorities, the Attorney General, Columbus Police Department, and let's get an investigation happening. Let's get some justice for these people, and let's stop this from happening to anyone else. So on that note, I will say have a good evening, and join me next week where I will have a new guest on the show. Have a good night.